Thank you very much for your patience this evening. We apologize for the technical difficulties. Isn't it ironic that on the day we have Microsoft speaking, it has taken 15 people and 3 laptops to try and get our presentation started. But we appreciate your patience. We obviously have a packed house. We've had to pull out more chairs, so the turnout has been tremendous. And we're very, very happy that all of you are here this evening. Before I get underway with my formal introduction of our speaker, I am very pleased to introduce the Dean of the Marshall School of Business, Dean Jim Ellis, who is here tonight to welcome all of you to this great program and this great event. So without further ado, Dean Jim Ellis.
Welcome, Trojans. Or as they say on the other side of the ocean, Kung Hee Fat Choi. Happy New Year. Today's the year of the ox. Means that every day should be a new year, but let's just start with today and hope we have a better year going forward. A couple of things, because we really are running late, as Willie said. I just want to tell all the mentors how much we truly appreciate what you guys do for our students. This is really a very, very meaningful program to us, and mostly to the students, and particularly in a time like this. As we all know, it's going to be a difficult time looking for jobs as we get out of school. And all of your advice and coaching, all of you guys who are so much older and have been through this so many times before, we all know how difficult it is. And I have to commend you students as the mentees in this particular case, because you're smart enough to say, tell me what I can do, how do I go about finding a job, finding an internship, and asking people who have some wisdom and are spending time out in the business world. And that's what you do all the time when you're in business, is you don't try and do it yourself. You always look to advisors and you look to people to give you thoughts about how you can do it better. And being a part of this program is a huge plus for you, and I commend every one of you for being here. And we all know that there's lots of other places you could be. There's lots of other places where our mentors could be. So I thank everybody for being here. I commend the students for being here, and I thank the mentors. It's really a thing that we truly appreciate here at Marshall. That's why we think we have the best students in the United States and maybe the world, just because they're smart enough to take advantage of this program. So it's great to have all you guys here. I'll let Mike do his thing, and I'm really excited to watch this. And who's introducing? Willie, are you up? Thank you, guys.
As Corporate Vice President of Global Marketing for Microsoft Corporation's Interactive Entertainment business, Michael Delman is responsible for the Xbox 360, Xbox Live, Xbox 360 games, and games for Windows brands. With nearly 2 decades of global marketing experience at Microsoft, Delman has joined and worked, across various business sectors and regions. He joined Microsoft in 1990 as Director of Corporate Communications, and later became the Director of Marketing for Microsoft EMEA, focusing on pan-European distribution strategy, licensing, market research, and public relations. He also served as General Manager of the MSN Internet Access business. Before joining Microsoft, Delman was a Vice President at Ogilvy and Mather and a NWA'er. He earned his bachelor and master's degrees in business administration here at the USC Marshall School of Business, and served on the Seattle Children's Hospital Foundation Board of Directors for nearly a decade. He currently sits on the Seattle Children's Hospital Board of Trustees. We're very, very pleased to welcome all the way from Seattle, Washington, Michael Delman.
Well, thank you, Willie, and thank you, Dean Ellis. As a student here many, many years ago, if they would have told me I was speaking in town and gown, I might not have come, because there's no amount of technology upgrades you could do to get this place into the technology millennium. Thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to have made the trip. I think it's really phenomenal that this program exists. It would have been a great thing to have this when I was an undergraduate, or as a graduate student for that matter. I'd like to echo some of Dean Ellis's comments. First of all, to the mentors, I know your schedules are incredibly busy. I know I mentor a lot of people at Microsoft, and it's very time consuming. It's not a casual endeavor. So the fact that you're making the time and the commitment says a lot about your character and your commitment to the students and to the school. And I would also like to echo Dean Ellis's comments about the students. not every student in the undergraduate business school is sitting in this room today. You've made a commitment. I know as an undergraduate, even if this opportunity existed, I may have made other choices. I may have been at the 9-0, I may have been somewhere else. So you two deserve a lot of credit for participating in the program. Now, true to form, technical assistant, can we ignore this? Hold your breath. Okay. So as I mentioned, about 10 years ago, we put a fairly formal mentoring program in at Microsoft. And I think it's the responsibility of every senior manager and every executive in the company to mentor people. And I take that job very seriously. And mentoring for me takes really two forms. It takes the form of onboarding more senior executives who come into the company, and Microsoft's not an easy place to acclimate to. It has a unique culture that's fairly different than most other corporations. And I enjoy that onboarding. That mentoring is a lot of times more of a peer-to-peer mentoring. The mentoring I really enjoy, though, is with people early in their careers who are looking for career advice. And I think it's probably a fairly similar relationship to the people mentoring people in this room. I have found that mentors take certain approaches, and I've definitely found that mentees take two distinct approaches. Some mentees are there just for networking, and when somebody comes into the room to, they've asked me to mentor them, they come into the room, you can tell right away if they're there to learn or if they're there to try to fast track their career. And the people who are there actually there for a development opportunity, they're a little more deliberate about their career, a little more in tune to trying to learn things, are the ones that I think get the most out of a mentoring relationship. I know for me, being a source of networking is fairly superficial. Being a source of help and guidance is really valuable. So I want to level set. I've been speaking at universities across the country for about 15, 20 years now, and usually to graduate students. And every year that went by, I had a little sense that at some point the gap between my age and the student's age was going to become so big that I was going to become their father. And so the things that I talked about were going to be actually perceived as coming from their father because the gap was so big. I would say maybe a baby boomer versus millennial point of view. And so what I want to do is we'll do a little check and see how we do on this to see how big the gap is. Okay, I went to a concert recently, and I was really pleased to see people from my generation and their kids at the concert, everybody knowing the words to every song, and it was really heartening because I felt somehow I was going to be able to communicate with my 13-year-old and 10-year-old sons that the gap hadn't become too big. So, for the younger people in the audience, the students, who is this? Good. How many people would have got that? So we have officially confirmed I am your parent, and I will approach this appropriately. So, because this is a mentor-mentee relationship program, I thought I would talk about some of the experiences I had with people that mentored me. And these weren't actually formal mentor relationships. They were actually quite informal. And the fact of mentoring is sometimes the information that's being imparted upon you makes no sense when the person's talking to you about it. It's only a year later, or 5 years later, or 10 years later that you actually get the full effect of what that person was saying. So I'm going to talk about a few people that mentored me. I'm going to talk about it through their lens at the time, and I'm also going to put my own spin on it because they were a generation ahead of me, and that's generally how it works. So this next gentleman, I was surprised Dean Ellis actually knew this person. He's probably the only person in the room. Does anybody else know who this gentleman is on the left? Okay, this is Bob Emmons. Bob Emmons is a lawyer. He's a former Fortune 500 CEO. He's a poet. He's a sailor. And he really, even back when I was an undergraduate, was a Renaissance man. And he was a professor at USC, and he also happened to be my girlfriend's father. So, how big is an average class size these days for undergraduates? For, freshman year, sophomore year English class, 200 people? So back then, it was a lot of people. And the unfortunate part about Dr. Emmons knowing me is he knew nobody else in the class. So for the first month or month and a half of class, I basically got a private lecture. He knew me by name, he knew my background, and we basically had a one-on-one relationship in front of 199 other people. One day, Dr. Emmons went off on a diatribe, a different path. He very seldom, it was a sales and marketing class. I don't think he ever taught sales and marketing. I think he mostly taught life lessons. And he went on to a whole diatribe about the need to, when you graduate, to travel, to experience the world. He talked about SART. Nobody in the class even knew who SART was. And he went on, and he was looking at me the whole time because he knew up to that point I'd only been on a plane once in my life. He knew when I graduated I'd have $1.99 in my pocket. Luckily I was not in debt. And he knew my first instinct would be to go hit the road, get a job, and start making my way. So in a way he was giving me a lecture of, take your time, go experience other cultures. And you have to remember back then, this is more of, again, a Renaissance man's perspective. There was really not a global economy back when he was teaching. It was just emerging. So he wasn't talking about getting immersed in China or in India or in Europe for that matter. He was talking about the personal side of it. And it was the first lesson I really learned. And at the time, there was no lesson for me. I thought he was a crazy man talking to me about something that I had no interest in and had no means to actually execute on. But he said he saw very many people go to work for 30, 40 years, get so old by the time they finally traveled to see other places that they basically wasted their life. And again, the message was lost on me until about 10 years into my career, I actually went and worked in Paris for 2 years. And right there, reading my book every Saturday morning in the Tuileries, I got the message. It's about balance. And that was not something that he said, I'm gonna mentor you and pull you aside. It was something that came up in conversation. And I'm pretty certain he had a purpose in doing that. So we'll continue. Can you name that face? Anybody name this person? So this person is John Graham. He was my professor a year later as an undergraduate. And John and I today are good friends. He's a professor at UCI. I think his wife is the associate dean of the business school. He's a politician of sorts, although he's a Democrat. Democrats in Orange County, not very electable, but he's given it a good go a couple times, and he's an amazing gentleman. So my story about Dr. Graham was in his class my senior year, we were taking our final exam. Do you still do final exams in Blue Books? Okay, maybe there isn't a generation gap. So there were 4 essay questions. The last essay question went something like this. Your company's doing business in Venezuela. It's standard practice in Venezuela to give kickbacks, bribes to do business. All your competitors are giving kickbacks to the local officials to be able to do business. Your company will probably not be viable in this market without giving kickbacks. Would you participate and give kickbacks? So this lesson is about ethics. And here's how Dr. Graham handled it. If you said yes, or you said yes and rationalized it, if you said anything basically, but no, I would not give kickbacks, he docked your score 1 full grade. That wasn't for the test, that was for the semester. And you can bet that that activity got a lot of people upset. Nobody really felt like they were being mentored. They felt like they were being punished. But what he left was a lifelong impression with a lot of students about character and values and ethics. And again, my comment about the world economy back there not being as robust as it is now also pertains to scandal. I'm sure there were a lot of scandals back in those days, but you didn't have the media that covered it. They weren't of the Enron or WorldCom or Madoff proportions. So he had the foresight as an educator, not really a mentor in that case, of actually providing us with a very valuable lesson that as we got into business made more sense. Back then he was just a dirty SOB that tanked our grade. And luckily, I was trying to recall today why I said no, I wouldn't give the kickback. And I'm sure it was some combination of two things. One, I was raised in a family with a pretty strict moral compass, but that was only half of it. I figured saying no and just writing no was a lot easier way to finish my exam than to actually write an explanation. So no seemed like a logical answer, and I put 2 and 2 together, and luckily my grade was sustained. So I found when I speak, many times I try not to talk about Bill because I feel like it's a bit trite. There's a lot more to Microsoft than Bill Gates. And every time I did that, people rebelled. Tell us about Bill, what's it like, blah, blah, blah. And I felt like in some way I was cheating the audience. And I don't consider Bill a mentor per se, but I consider him a coworker for many years, 23 years we worked together. And so I feel like it's important to talk about Bill just to meet everybody's expectation. A lot of people are asking what's it like without Bill? What was Bill's last day like? What was his exit from the company like as a full-time employee? So what I thought I'd do is, after I reject this offer again, I'll play a video that will give you a sense of what Bill's last day was like, and then I'll talk to you about some of the valuable lessons I learned from him. So there's your fill of Bill. What I'm going to tell you about Bill and what I've learned from Bill is going to be a bit of a contradiction to what I told you I learned from Bob Emmons. If we go back to Bob Emmons, the second slide, what he was telling me about was balance. And balance to him meant not charging into a job, as I said, but going to explore the world a little bit. And actually, a lot of people of your age, your situation come through my office to interview, and I'm going to give you a little twist on that. What I see a lot of today is people that actually haven't made a mark, and actually people who are more willing to travel than to actually get down in the weeds and get accomplishment. And so I know it is a generational thing. It's a lot different. As I said, I was only on a plane once by the time I graduated. Everybody in this room has been on a plane probably 50 times. So the world is a smaller place and travel's a commonplace thing. But I'd really encourage you, and you could talk to your mentors about this, when you come in for jobs, you're not going to have accomplishment your first day. That doesn't happen. You don't have accomplishment coming out of school. But what you want is you want to get some momentum before you go try to figure out SART in the Tuileries Gardens. And what I find today is a lot of people will do a year or 2 years and then go get the itch. And I think you need to get momentum before you explore the world. So it's a bit of a contradiction. And the amazing thing about Bill Gates, this is a smart man. And he's a man that people would profess to be very brilliant. But what he said is when it comes down to it, it's 90% perspiration and 10% inspiration. So this is coming from one of the most successful businessmen in the world. And it's about hard work and it's about commitment. So I would encourage you to balance finding your way around the world and becoming a citizen of the world with really good hard work ethic. And you'll get sucked in different directions. You'll get sucked into the equivalent of the internet boom and trying to make a gazillion dollars in public companies. And for the most part, there's no substitute for just good hard work, good ethics, good character. And I think that will get you a long way. The other thing I learned from Bill that I think is really important is you need to follow your passion. It was non-trivial for Bill to leave a company that he founded and was really identified directly with him. But you could see it over the last couple of years. Bill would talk about business. He'd be very animated and very passionate about Microsoft. But simultaneously, he'd start talking about his foundation work, curing malaria, curing TB, helping out with the fight against HIV in Africa. And they were two different Bills. One was supercharged Microsoft and one was something above that. And what he basically made a choice to do, which is very bold, was to give up the company that he founded and he ran to go do what his passion told him what needed to be done. And I think you guys need to find your passion. Toiling at a job that doesn't float your boat, toiling at a job that you're not excited to do is not something that makes a good career. And I have been fortunate enough to work at a company where you get to reinvent yourself on a lot of different businesses. And I think you should look for companies that are a good fit with you ethically, culturally, and basically in a line of business that's interesting. And I think that's real critical. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is a gentleman by the name of Scott Oakey. And this is not Scott Oakey, obviously. Scott Oakey was the person that hired me at Microsoft. He was the senior VP of sales and marketing at the time. And I think I might have been 29 years old at the time I started working for Scott. I was new to the Pacific Northwest. I'm originally from Los Angeles. And Scott showed up in my office one day, and he said, I have a cause that I'm really passionate about. It's called Children's Hospital. And he says, I am so passionate that I'm going to match every donation up to $1 million. And he said, I want you to give $10,000. So here I am. What would 10,000, economic finance people, would that be $20,000 in today's dollars? So basically, I'm 29 years old, new to the company, no children, so the notion of a children's hospital had no resonance with me. And he said, basically, I want you to give $10,000, and I want you to get involved. And I'm thinking, this is like Bob Emmons, talking about sartans, about John Graham talking about, ethics. It was just, as I said, some of these lessons are delayed. They kick in later when you're ready to have them kick in. And so I begrudgingly got out my checkbook, and they said, oh, by the way, Microsoft will match that. So now I've used my match on Children's Hospital, so $20,000 is going to Children's Hospital. For no rhyme or reason in my mind. But he was my boss, I respected him, so I followed his lead. Same time next year, guess what happened? I'm matching up to $1 million again. We raised a lot of money last year. How about another 10,000? And don't forget Microsoft matches. And this went on for a couple years. And eventually he said, you know what? There's a foundation board seat coming up. And you have to understand what Children's Hospital looks like in Seattle. Everybody's about 110 years old that works there. It's an institution. It's just a great, great place. There's up until 3 years ago, there was never a male on the governing board of the hospital. It was all female. It was a place where a 29 or 30-year-old person from Los Angeles really didn't fit in. So quite honestly, I thought Scott's advice, mentoring was quite misguided at the time. But I went and met with him, and I spent 10 years on the foundation board there, and recently moved on to the governing board, and now I'm one of 5 men on the governing board. So it's actually, for me, it was great advice because it's the opposite of Microsoft. Usually it's 95 men and 5 women because it's an engineering culture. At Children's Hospital, it's the opposite. So the shoe is on the other foot, and it's been a great learning experience. And my message, I think Scott's message to me, and he's gone on to be probably the top philanthropist in Seattle or in Washington State, and his message to me was give back. And some of you will graduate with $1.99 in your pocket. Some of you will graduate with debt, and you can still give back. You have time, you have knowledge, you have compassion, and again, you're probably a similar age group to where I was back then, and it may not mean a lot, but it's really, really gratifying. And some of you will hit it big, very quickly, and you can give back by making financial contributions. Whatever you do, find something just like your job that you're passionate about and get involved. It is, along with children and family, it is one of the most gratifying things I've ever done. So those are messages that I learned from other people. Again, messages that meant nothing when they were delivered. Hopefully there's more of a connection immediately with your mentors. But I would really, rather than thinking of it as a network or an opportunity, think of it as a learning opportunity. Think hard about what they're saying. And also, hopefully it will kick in. I think your generation is a little more sophisticated, a little more savvy than mine was. And I think there's great value in the mentoring relationship. So for me, the formula is really quite simple. Be balanced. Whatever that means for you, balance could be more work for some people, less work for other people. But if you're going to do a job, do it well, and make sure you give time to other things. ethics and character never go out of style. I cannot tell you how much I look for this in people I talk to and I recruit. If I can get to their moral compass, their ethical standards, I figure half the interviewing job's done. It's probably more important in a lot of ways than their competency in the actual profession that they're pursuing. Bill, 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration. I will say it would be a bit just disingenuous not to mention luck plays a part. And I think what you have to do is you need to work hard to create some luck. And I think for people that work hard, luck generally will come your way, whether it's a year, 5 years, 10 years. I think if you're persistent, you make your own luck. Give back and have fun and keep perspective. Would you consider yourself an email culture or more of a texting culture now? Texting? Have you ever just been in a fight with somebody and fired back a text message and just wish you could pull it back, you could move out into that's happened before, maybe in a relationship. It's not good stuff. And people who maintain their perspective, I think generally will cool off. And when you get into a business environment, you'll be in an email culture, you'll be in a text culture, and a lot of bad things can happen. I think pulling away and keeping perspective that this is not life and death. Most things that appear to be personal are not personal. I think that's advice that if you take it to heart will serve you well. So with that, I think we started a bit late. I might be running a little bit over time, but I'm happy to answer as many questions as people have. Thank you. Who's the first brave soul? Yes, ma'am.
If they ask you the question that your teacher asked you, the yes or no question, and right now, and you were doing business in Minnesota, what would you say?
Oh, now, I mean, as I said, my brain back then was a bit different and not fully developed, and I had other things on my mind, as most college students do. So it took me a little while to figure it out. Now, I mean, there's temptations in business come in more subtle ways than that. To me, that one is a slam dunk, automatic no. You wouldn't even think about it. There'll be more gray areas, and that's where your moral compass and your ethical compass will be challenged. I'm sure the mentors in the room can attest to that. And it doesn't happen every day, but you'll get to a seminal moment where it's important for your career, it's important for the business, it's important for the people that work for you, who you feel responsible for. And I've never seen anything good come of people making the wrong ethical or moral decision. Yes.
What sort of advice or perspective do you have for our students who may be graduating into this economy this year or early next year about keeping perspective, following passions, etc.?
Did everybody hear the question? The question was basically, you guys are going to be coming out of school in a fairly tough environment, maybe an understatement, and what advice would I give you? Most of you probably were not born, but I graduated from undergraduate school in 1980. Jimmy Carter was the president. I think last year we paid $4 for a gallon of gas. Back in that time, many of your mentors will tell you you couldn't actually get gas. And if you wanted to get gas, you stood in line. We used to park down on Hoover or somewhere in a convertible Corvair with a backgammon set and sat in line for 2.5 hours to get gas. Interest rates were 17%. Yeah, the mentors are all shaking their heads. This is a very vivid memory. So I can actually empathize with what it's like to be in the situation. I don't think, this situation is different, but people were pretty darn scared back then, and the prospects for people coming out of university were not good. I know it probably took me 3 or 4 months after I graduated. By the way, I was not globetrotting the world with my $1.99. I was pounding the pavement. It took me about 4 months to get a job. And what's the funny saying? When you lose something and you always find it the last place you look. Once you get that job, even if it takes 4 months or 6 months, you will forget that it took you 4 or 6 months to get it, and then you have to get down to the business of really performing. And as I said, you want to follow your passions, and you want to be doing something you really like. I would just urge all of you to get a good reset on expectations, what people will be paying, how much equity stake they'll give you in a company. And trust me, it won't last forever. It won't hurt that much. And really, bearing down and compromising a little bit to get something that is a good start for you, I think is super important. I think being overly selective within reason is probably not a great thing. I think you need experience, and once you get experience, you'll find a lot of good things happen if you perform well. Yes, sir.
What are the key marketing differences between the gaming industry, software industry versus, say, consumable goods and the simple services?
So the question was, what's the difference between, I guess, interactive gaming, interactive entertainment, and consumer packaged goods? Marketing. One of the reasons, Dean Ellis can attest to this, I was pretty close to retiring in July. And I got very much enamored with the job I have now, which is on Xbox. And I was enamored because I was returning out of business to business marketing, which is mostly what Microsoft does, back into consumer marketing. And I will tell you, the discipline of consumer marketing transfers from soap to peanut butter to video games. There's some subtle differences, but the marketing is very much the same. I will tell you, what's happened mostly is marketing's changed a lot. It's not the traditional stuff when I was marketing beer or car wax when I was first starting out. It's much more viral. And in the games industry, I think that gets really amplified because you have a hardcore base that really does carry the message. But the discipline of using science rather than just pure art, having data, analyzing data, I think those packaged goods fundamentals are great. And I don't know what it's like today, but I know there's been cycles. I did a lot of recruiting for Microsoft over a period of time, and the first time I walked into Stanford or Harvard or wherever I was going, people said, I have to work for Microsoft. It's the up and coming company, we have to work there. And then I went back 2 years later and said, they said, you guys are old school. We want to go work in management consulting. And then management consulting got a little tough, and I went back and they said, Microsoft's looking pretty good. And then I went back a couple years later and they said, Microsoft's passé, I want to go into investment banking. So you have all these cycles. And I don't know what the cycle is today, but I will tell you, a Procter & Gamble, a Johnson & Johnson, a Kraft, if you want to be a consumer marketer, a Nestle, which is right down the street for you guys, if they're hiring, that's a great way to get good business fundamentals. Packaged goods companies, not the most exciting places in the world all the time, but they do have systems down, and I actually think they're getting much more inventive. But they are like machines, and you can take that experience, go work on Xbox, go work on the iPhone, whatever you want to do. So it transfers quite well. Yes, in the back.
What are some of the best environments someone at the start of their career can find to really learn and grow in?
So the question was, what are the best environments to start your career and look and grow in? I think it's a personal thing. We do a lot of, I don't know, profiling sounds bad. It sounds like it has some bad connotation, but we do a lot of psychological testing at Microsoft so people know how to interact with each other. Like, you would find out from my psychological testing that I'm more of an introvert. And when you get an introvert and an extrovert, and an introvert that's very structured, the logic of me actually surviving at Microsoft and excelling is pretty low. It's a very extroverted climate, and it thrives on a lot of chaos. And so, to your question, I think you need to find an environment. You have to know who you are. And if you want to pretend you're an extrovert when you're really an introvert, it's a dangerous game. If you want, if you think you can be in an environment where there's a lot of conflict, a lot of back and forth, a lot of debate, when you really don't like that, it's a risky proposition. I think the best thing you can do is, one, find a place that matches your style. And I think you can figure out the culture of the company. I think they're pretty public. You'll get surprised. People will talk about the culture, but in general, they'll peg it pretty accurately for the most part. And I think you just need to get a sense of also what your degrees of flexibility are to go out of your comfort zone. If you go too far out, I think the likelihood of success is not good. I'd also look for a company. Stability is good. Nothing more disheartening. I will tell you, my second job, TCI, which is a big cable company owned by John Malone at the time, came in and acquired my company, and I was out of work. And you want to go to places where you think there's some glide way and some path for you. Yes.
At Microsoft, what sort of jobs do people that are 21 to 24 years old hold?
It's interesting. Did everybody hear the question? What kind of jobs at Microsoft do 21 to 24-year-olds hold? It used to be at Microsoft that if you didn't have an MBA or an engineering degree or software development degree, there was no way in. And I think we were talking about this tonight. Actually, Microsoft has soured a little bit on graduate students. The expectations got out of whack and really had a formal program for undergraduates called the MLR program. And what you'll generally get is you'll get, I think the pay is pretty good. What's your area of expertise? What are you majoring in?
Business and technology.
Technology, but not an engineer?
No.
I think there's a lot of places at a lot of companies, I don't know right now at this moment, but I think the undergraduate is getting back in vogue. It used to be only the MBAs could be there. But there's a lot of entry-level positions, I think, historically at companies like Microsoft. And again, you have to set your expectations. You'll be doing a lot of running and a lot of legwork for people. You won't be running the show. And I think that's traditionally, people have come in and wanted to be managers a bit prematurely. And I think trying to get on a management track, because the goal ultimately for a lot of people is to be a general manager, is not going to happen as quickly as it probably has in the past. But I do think there's opportunity. Yes, in the back.
Following up on that, what is your comment about going and getting an MBA right after undergraduate, a year or so later, or 5 or 6 years later?
So the question was, should you take a gap before you go back to graduate school? I think it would pertain to any kind of graduate degree. I know the conventional wisdom is take a break, go get some experience and come back. That's what I did. And I will tell you, I was a so-so undergraduate student, and I was a really good graduate student, because when I went back to graduate school, I was motivated and I had some clue about the context of what was being discussed. So I'm personally a big proponent of taking a break. I'm also a pragmatist, and I will tell you, it's, you guys may be looking at my 4-month thing that I had with Jimmy Carter as president. And if it gets prolonged, and nobody knows, Dean Ellis and I were talking about how long and how deep is this going to be, nobody knows. I wouldn't hesitate to go back and get an advanced degree in something you're passionate about. I do think the extra schooling is highly, highly beneficial. I think in today's environment, stopping, with a bachelor's degree, certainly Bill never even graduated from college. I was over at the cinema school today. Most of the characters that are on that board, Barry Diller, Steven Spielberg, never went to college, so you can be successful. But I think there's a lot to be learned, and I actually think graduate school's maybe even a bit more stimulating than undergraduate if you have a purpose. Yes, over here.
How did you tackle the kind of gamer market? You mentioned it's very hardcore, very loyalist. How did you kind of get that going?
So the question was, how did I make the transition to do gamer marketing, because gamers can be quite hardcore. I consider myself the conscious of our division, and the analogy I use a lot. Does anybody here play basketball? Have you ever seen little kids play basketball? If a kid's right-handed, where do they end up in the basketball court? Right side corner. So I think Xbox, which I think is a bit of a niche brand relative to a Wii or even a PlayStation. We had a good right hand. That was our hardcore, and we always went to it. And I watched the group when I first got there, and I'd see them put the ball in their left hand. What happens when a kid puts the ball in the left hand? How long does it take for it to go back to the right hand?
1, 2 seconds.
Yeah, 1 or 2 seconds. So what we would do is we'd say, we want to go broad, and we want to get out of this niche we're in, and we put the ball in our left hand, and we get a little uncomfortable, maybe it bounces above our head, then it'd go right back in the right hand, we'd be right back in the right hand corner. And so my job, quite frankly, I'm not going to make Halo more successful. I'm not going to figure out how to get more attach rate from the hardcore audience. There's a lot of people who do that really well, a lot of right-handed people. I think I'm the left-handed person. How do we make Xbox a brand that's approachable for families? How do we evolve the technology so it can compete with the Wii? And that's really my purpose for being. And in a way, it's probably also a good mentoring lesson. You don't have to do it all. If you have very competent people that know how to dribble with their right hand, and as a leader, you can pave the way for them to do that, not get in their way, and then grow the gene and the rest of the company, or the rest of the division, that's really what I'm there for. And by the way, huge challenge to take something that I think most mothers really think is disgusting and have them open up their door to a live service that's connected to an internet. It's a great marketing challenge, but I think it's very doable. It's a good question. Yes?
So speaking of marketing challenges, as you attempt to broaden the brand, you've had some unanticipated product challenges with the Xbox, and that's led to substantial financial costs for the organization. How have you overcome that challenge with marketing?
Yeah. So the question was about the Red Ring of Death. We took a big write-off. The great thing about having a base that's very dedicated, dare I say almost addicted, which is the hardcore base we own, is they're really almost quite willing to overlook anything. It's not to say that they weren't frustrated, it's not to say that they didn't lose confidence in the brand, but I know a lot of people who basically just went out and bought another Xbox like it was a razor blade because they wanted to be back online playing with their friends around the world. The real question is, and what I'm convincing the group of as we do products going forward is the next rung of audiences are not going to be nearly as forgiving. If we had gone broad and were successful in really broadening the brand and we had that problem, we would be closed out of business because the confidence of the next 40 million or 50 million people and patients would have been lower and shattered. So I think the smart thing we did. How many people here have studied the Johnson & Johnson Tylenol case? Does that come up in school? The basic case was somebody tampered with Tylenol. There was a death, and what Johnson & Johnson did very smartly was they recalled immediately. They made no excuses, and they basically had a brand that was strong enough to, when they did those things, was to withstand that. And I think the thing we did is we admitted our mistake very quickly. We took, $1.5 billion write-off. I would say our execution was good, not great, because some boxes have come back. I think that's a brand, that hurts the brand quite a bit. But I think we were responsible. And taking $1.5 billion write-off in a division that only generates $6 billion of revenue is a painful kick in the teeth. So. Yes?
A lot of people see the seniority or title gap as very intimidating. After rising to one of the top positions in one of the greatest companies in the world, how do you see, what advice do you have for someone trying to overcome that, for like a sophomore or a freshman trying to speak to a corporate VP of a company?
Yeah, that's great. Did everybody hear that? So, I'm a pretty cautious person. As I said, I'm introverted. I have traditionally I've had an overly healthy respect for hierarchy and people, senior. And I think I was maybe on the lunatic fringe of being conservative. And I think what you need to do is you need to appreciate that people in senior positions are human. People in senior positions generally care if they're worth their salt. And people in senior positions like honesty and like to hear it straight. And so I think what you need to do is you need to probably let down your guard a little bit more than I was willing to do when I was young. I was pretty, like this person, I'm just down here, and there was a lot of deference. And I think you can do more. I think you can approach people. Just the fact that you're in this room means you're willing to have a dialogue with people that are older and more experienced, which I think is a very good sign. But I do think you also have to have a healthy level of respect. And again, that's a generational thing. And it may not be disrespect in a flagrant sense, but you can send signals. And I think when you send signals to people senior that are disrespectful signals, that is a bit of the kiss of death. So I think find that balance of not being as wound as tight as you may want to be because somebody is maybe an authority figure, if you will, but also being very, very respectful, I think is a good balance. And you know what? People you work for, if you're doing a good job, they want to give you more. And the more they give you, the more you're going to interact with them, and it's an opportunity to really get to know people, and I think that helps you let your guard down a little bit.
Thanks.
Yes?
Can you share one of your great strengths that you use to overcome challenges?
My greatest what? I'm sorry?
Your strength.
My strengths. It's interesting. My father was born in Russia. We heard a lot of talk about immigration. We heard a lot of talk about the Depression. I was raised pretty conservatively. I had little envelopes with, my allowances and how much I could spend on entertainment. I was just raised probably a little atypical and a little bit more conservative. And I think that's really served me well. I think I was a real hard worker. I was very tenacious. I made a lot of mistakes. There's no doubt about that. I think patience and persistence goes a long way. And, I'll be the first one to say I'm lucky. People will say, no, it's not luck, you made your luck. I think I got some good breaks, but I think you have to be there. A lot of people hang it up too quickly. They walk away, they get frustrated, and I think more and more generations and generations have less stick-to-itiveness. And I think if you're able to stick with it, I think that serves a real big benefit. And I could talk about being clever. I'm not an overt risk taker, although as time goes by, I've become more comfortable with that. But it sounds kind of blue collar workmanlike, but it's served me well. Yes.
The active entertainment industry has gone through tremendous change over the last 10 years. Where do you see it going over the next 10?
Well, I'm going to work a lot longer than I anticipated if I have a crystal ball and I can figure out. But I will tell you that I think there's a complete blurring of the lines around devices. Nobody would have ever thought that you would be playing games built by mere individuals in the community on a phone, and that's become very popular. I do think there's going to be a lot of merging of the social aspect, the Facebook phenomenon, and gaming and entertainment. I think it's interesting to think we really have a cable box, or will you be running stuff off of an Xbox of some sort, movies on demand, high definition. Blu-ray's an interesting thing. I'm sure there's people from Sony in here, so I'll tread lightly, but do you really need a disk drive, an optical disk drive, or should you just have a hard drive and things be streamed and downloaded? I think games more and more will be on demand, entertainment will be on demand. I think, I say this and I believe it, but a lot of people roll their eyes. I'm not sure there will be a need in 5 years for physical media. I mean, think about your iPod, think about your Zoom, think about your phone, think about your console. You don't have physical media on your cable box. So I think that's very much the trend. I also think I think Nintendo is quite brilliant on just this natural user interface and natural play where you don't have to be the hardcore zealot gamer anymore. And I think once you open up avenues to a broader base, ability to get other things beyond games, just entertainment in general, scheduling, calendaring, I think it all becomes part of the system, and I don't think it's controlled by a keyboard or a controller. Yes?
How did you find balance in your life and how do you maintain it?
The question was, how do I find balance? I'll tell you a funny story. When I was, my first 3 or 4 years at Microsoft was great. Those days they trapped you like crazy. I ate breakfast. I went to work out in the morning. I ate breakfast at Microsoft, ate lunch at Microsoft, and ate dinner at Microsoft. And one day, I woke up, and you know the trays that you get at a cafeteria? I had them stacked up to my ceiling. And I just, at that point, I thought, wow, you've lost your balance. And the real crowning moment, and I liked it. I wasn't married, I didn't have children. I'll tell you, the time to go crazy, if you're not gonna be balanced, is now. Because I don't recommend that lifestyle once you get married, once you have children. It doesn't generally work. I had the opportunity, as I mentioned, to move to Paris to work for Microsoft. I was newly married at the time, and my wife basically said, here's the contract. We're not going to move to a foreign land where I don't speak the language. It was her speaking. You're going to go to work every day, and I'm going to sit at home, and then you're going to, eat your breakfast, lunch, and dinner at Microsoft in Paris. And she said, if we're going to go, we're going to be balanced, we're going to take advantage of things, we're going to do trips. And I still, relative to Parisians in the French, I worked pretty hard. They actually thought I was a little crazy based on my hours, but it was much more balanced. I think that was a real important tipping point for me. When you have kids, how many of you listen to Adam Carolla? He basically I was listening to him very early in the morning this morning, and he was talking about the ultimate failure. You'll be measured on how much you make, how much you give, how much education you have. But he said the ultimate failure is a failure to have your kids respect you and like you when they're grown. And I guarantee you, for the most part, if you spend as much time as I spent when I was 23, 24, 29, 30 without kids working, the likelihood of you having that outcome is not good. And I know not everybody in here will want to have kids, and that's a great choice for people to make. But if you're going to have them, trust me, I believe that a lot more when my kids are teenagers. I think you have to, it's a good reason to pay your dues up front, because I think you want to get some balance. And by the way, health's not guaranteed. Nothing's guaranteed. It could change in a minute, and you will not be measured when you leave this earth by the extra hour you worked for a corporation. I can guarantee that. Yes.
Has the success of the Wii has it had a significant influence on where Xbox is heading in the future?
The question was, has the success of the Wii had impact on the Xbox? Yes. I mean, it's a great phenomenon. And I was talking about this walking over. There are certain characteristics of an Xbox audience which is really quite golden. The brand doesn't get tarnished when you mess up because they're so passionate. The amount of stuff they buy, what we call the attach rate, massive. The amount of time they spend online live playing is just unprecedented. A Wii, massive phenomenon. They sold 2 million units in a month, and their Christmas was incredible, and they deserve a lot of credit. But the first games traded in are Wii games. The least amount of attach is with the Wii. It's just to a different audience. And so as we evolve our thinking, we have to go from a world where we have all this massive revenue and profitability opportunity to a market that's going to be competitive, much more selective, and not quite as robust and plentiful. It's a little bit like moving from Windows to any other business. You don't grow 90% margin businesses, more than once or twice in a company. And if you grow them twice in a company, that's pretty phenomenal. Just a question over here.
What challenges did you face taking the Xbox global, and what lessons did you take away from that experience?
Yeah, quite honestly, the question was, what lessons have I learned about global with Xbox? The bar was really low. Xbox really had no footprint in Japan. It had no footprint where Nintendo and Sony were obvious choices there. It had no footprint in Europe. We had totally neglected Europe, which is a market where we should have done well on out of the gates. We were fundamentally a US phenomenon until recently. And it's going to sound trite, and simplistic, but the most valuable lesson I've learned is if you put good people with enough resources in a market and you give them a good product, it beats starving people in a market, not putting people there and expecting to gain market share. Fundamentally, we gave people on Xbox in Europe good control, a good product, a good set of technologies, and turned them loose. And we've gone from, really, in Europe, I'd consider us almost irrelevant a year ago. And we turned up the heat, and we generally have outsold Sony PlayStation 3 almost every week and every month in Europe, and are the clear number 2 player there. Now, tough year for Sony. It's a fickle business. Again, we were talking about this earlier. Who's on top today doesn't end up on top 2 or 3 years from now. It's never been that cycle. And Sony, by the way, has a massive PS2 base that people are still, have a lot of pent-up demand on. So I think getting good people in market, Americans working from Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Redmond, don't generally understand enough to do a great job in market. You need good local talent. Yes?
What are some of the sacrifices you've had to make for your career, and from the perspective of time, what's your take on it, like your advice for career advancement?
The question was, what sacrifices have I made? Quite honestly, when I was sitting in line playing backgammon waiting for gas my senior year in college, if somebody said you could write a script for your career, I probably could not have written it much better. I don't think I sacrificed too much. I don't think I gave too much or too little. Really quite balanced. I guess, in retrospect, I wish I might have been a little bolder at different points in time, where I saw a business trend that we were pursuing and I wasn't vocal enough. And that's not really a sacrifice I made, it's almost a regret I've had. An example is we were chasing dial-up internet, which most of you don't even remember dial-up internet. And it was clear that we would talk about broadband. And we talked about how broadband penetration was going to be it and how Wi-Fi would be there. And we understood it, yet we still chased dial-up because AOL was chasing it and we were afraid of AOL. And then you had the AOL Time Warner debacle, one of the biggest shams of business history, I think. And it would have been just obvious to say, kill my job, because we shouldn't be doing this. We should be out of this business and pursuing something different. So I don't think I've made massive sacrifices at all. My family may say something differently, but I think they think, I'm generally there for the most part. But I would do things a little bit differently. Yes, ma'am.
What's a typical day like for you at work?
Typical day. First of all, I'm a very early riser. I'm generally up by about 4:15 in the morning. And so I generally like to work out. Most people in the group will tell you they can tell the difference between the days I worked out and the days I haven't worked out based on my demeanor. And quite honestly, I do a lot of managing. I've really learned a little story I'll share. When I was early in my career, I was giving the team a pep talk about teamwork and trusting each other. And I was still pretty young and I thought I understood it. And we were having a team building event that day, and we had a baseball game, a softball game. It was co-ed, and we were playing, and I'm a pretty competitive guy. And there was a pop fly, and it was coming right to the pitcher, who was this really petite woman. And so what do you think I did? I was playing first base. I ran over and reached over and caught the ball. And that day, I realized that I had to start walking the walk. And talking about teamwork and talking about empowering people was more than just something you give in a pep talk. And today, when I go to work, I really think about how can I make decisions quickly to free somebody else up to make 3 decisions, to free somebody else up to make 6 decisions as you move down the chain. Nothing makes me madder than wasting time or gridlock. And a lot of my day is trying to alleviate the gridlock, to get fewer meetings, to get decisions done quicker, and to make sure decisions don't come undone. And so, I have, do you even talk about the 3 martini lunch anymore? No. It used to be when I was coming out of school, the notion was when you made it, you got to go to these big long lunches, and 2 or 3 hours of your day would be there sipping martinis, and all I know is to the story about the trays in the office. I eat breakfast in the office and I still eat lunch in the office, and it's a very comfortable lifestyle. As a matter of fact, I can't imagine wasting an hour or 2 hours going out for lunch unless it was to interview somebody. So, and a lot of meetings.
Last question.
Yes, sir.
Do you think that that hardcore crowd that you were talking about will become less relevant considering the emergence of a very highly profitable casual gaming market with the Wii?
It's a good question. I think the hardcore audience is not going to be a Wii user. That's my perception. I think what you'll do is you'll have a race for us to go more broad and them to move, downstream. But there's economics in this. Their box doesn't have the graphics horsepower, and I think hardcore gamers don't generally gravitate towards that paradigm of play. They like the live play. They like first-party shooter games, and I think there's always going to be a hardcore audience. I think it's hard to make a long-term living off the hardcore audience. I think you need a broader base. I think it's hard to make money just on selling games. I think what you need is a whole entertainment portfolio where there's experiences where people move from their hardcore game to playing a more casual game with other family members to watching a movie. So I think it's a very fascinating category. And to me, as I mentioned, it looks a lot like other consumer categories, but it does have its peculiarities, and it moves very quickly, and it changes a lot. And I think, all the companies, I'm sure there's entertainment people in this room, the Disneys, the Foxes, the Viacoms, everybody's trying to figure out really what their best play is. Okay. Thank you very much for your time.